Welcome to the first of our three-part series on 3 ways to analyze data with ChatGPT. Today we're going to start with the first and simplest method of analyzing data, which is just pasting the data straight into the ChatGPT window itself, and then we get ChatGPT to return some analysis. This is super quick, there's nothing to set up, you don't need any coding skills, and you can use a free ChatGPT account. So, what sort of situations is this useful for? This method of taking your data and pasting it straight into ChatGPT works for a sweet spot of dataset sizes where your data is small enough to paste it directly into ChatGPT without ChatGPT crashing, but the data is large and complex enough that you can't just eyeball it and have the insights immediately pop out. So here we have a dataset from the World Bank. It's got the GDP in US dollars of the 20 largest economies in the world. The 20 largest is determined by summing up their total GDP or total economic output over the entire period from 1960 all the way up to 2020. And we've got data points for each country every 5 years. Eyeballing this data, I don't really know what to do with it. If I try and visualize it, I can see something's going on with the top 3 economies, United States, China, and Japan. But this dataset is complex enough that with 20 countries here, most of these series that represent France, Korea, Indonesia, for example, I can't even find the lines for these countries in my little line chart here. So it's not immediately obvious what the insights in this dataset are. Enter ChatGPT. I can easily paste a dataset of this size into ChatGPT. Even if you're not sure what analysis you want to perform, you could simply start with something as simple as analyze this dataset and provide interesting insights. So I've got my data from Excel. I'm just copy pasting it right into the chat window, not bothering to edit anything, not bothering to change that scientific notation that the data's in. And let's see what ChatGPT comes up with. Okay, so what I'm really impressed with here is that ChatGPT has correctly identified that this dataset appears to be a record of gross domestic product of various countries over the time period in question. Now, coming back to our dataset here, there is no label that mentions GDP in the data. ChatGPT must have inferred that it's GDP data from having seen similar data to our dataset in its training data. The reason that I've chosen this particular GDP dataset is that I'm pretty comfortable with data about the growth of major economies, and I think most people at least know about some of the stories that are buried within this data. So we're going to know what ChatGPT is talking about, and we'll be able to verify that its outputs are correct. For example, you'd have to be living under a rock not to have heard about the explosive growth of China's economy since 1960. What's really cool is that ChatGPT puts this in a way that could be understood colloquially. It says that, well, at least in nominal terms, that is not accounting for inflation, China's economy has grown 245-fold since 1960. I think that's a fantastic way to put it and to drive home that point. Now, the output here is still in scientific notation, so I'm going to give it a few prompts here on how I'd like to see it improved. Another thing I'll call out is that there's only data from 1990 onwards for Russia. So ChatGPT is introducing its own knowledge to correctly fill in the blanks here and say this is because of the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Okay, so what I don't like about this output is the use of scientific notation. So I'll say rewrite this using billions of dollars instead of scientific notation. And now we have a final set of usable insights. Here's a sneak peek at what those insights look like in the form of a presentation. We created this deck in just a couple of seconds using a free online AI tool. Subscribe to Story IQ for our upcoming video on how to use AI to create presentations.